5, 4, 3. Oh. All right. In thought, in speech, and parenthetically, and everything else, you've got the conditioned and you've got the unadorned. It is my intention to primarily point your attention tonight to the area of speech. There has been, from areas as widely diverse as religion and science, a great interest in this matter, although they do not use my terms. I just barely use them. But after the first word anywhere, then all else is adorned. Religion, not just your Judaic-Christian, but all kinds of big-time religions, well-known, all kinds of small-time religions, have made a great big, I think the theological term is a big deal, out of the first word of the Creator, the God, or the committee of God somewhere. This first word is of supreme importance. They debate about it. They fought about it. Then, of course, science has their own view of this, the beginning of the universe. They're, in the Western world right now, the prevailing attitude, I think, is still primarily the Big Bang theory as far as the creation, if you take away the creationist theory of a God. But you understand that although they don't use my terms, they are still locked into a feeling, to a view that the first word is of supreme importance. They don't call it the first word, but what are they trying to do now? In astrophysics and particle physics, as diverse as those two areas within science are, find out what the first second was, or at least the second right after the first second, to keep trying to push the frontier back. And what they're asking for, what they're looking for, a unified theory, is probably what they're still calling, but what they're actually looking for is the first word. They're looking for the first word which was unadorned, because after the first one, it's all adorned. There is no such thing as a non-conditioned, unadorned word after the first one. And so you have that part of the human nervous system being run and paid for by life's own behind-the-scene packs. You have those that would apparently be involved with more religious, philosophical, softer sciences, arts, of being concerned about what was the first word. What was it, if there was some sort of sentient creator, a God, as your grandmother and grandfather used to say, that put all this in motion. Then it is of supreme importance. They don't know why. They can try and then become theological philosophers again. But they are simply driven to feel as though that first word would be of importance, that we should know what it is, we should recognize its importance, and there is some value if we could track it down. If there is actually some literal record left, that word is important, and they don't know why. And then science. Of course, science, I guess, gives a somewhat better verbal attempt to say why they believe it's important, of how it would benefit man, and etc. But some of you who may be getting good, it's no more an attack on science than it is religion. But science can't tell you why the belief that if some theory can be proven true or otherwise, or if they can expand some theory, they cannot literally tell you of what benefit it's going to be. Now they try, and they can say, well, all knowledge is a benefit. But they are still driven to believe, to say that it would be of supreme importance if we knew what that first word was. That is, the noise that the universe sends a God for a minute. That it just, out of some primordial soup went, whatever the sound was, would have been the first word. They're calling it the Big Bang, but I assume that they would admit that they're using bang right now as a synonym for an unknown word. but they considered that it would be of supreme importance to know what the first word was. Now, if all of you have followed it that far. Now consider that within your own individual nervous system, there is an unrecognized, unidentified, like drive that you keep wanting to know what the first word was in your universe. You certainly do not call it that, but that is what you're looking for. Every time you rely on memory, every time you look to the past, any time any part of your nervous system shakes you and says, boy, things were better yesterday. Things were better in 1750. Things were better in 1320, if you're going to push it. What you're doing is you are, in a non-specific, unnoted way, you are attempting to run your own science backwards to find the original, unconditioned, unadorned Big Bang. You're trying to find the first word because the first word was the only, intellectually, was the only unadorned word. Now, I'm trying to keep from doing a certain thing. So if I say I'm trying to keep from doing it, see, that's one of the few benefits of three-dimensional talk, is I can say I'm not going to do it and tell you what it is I'm trying not to do, and so you sort of try and have it both ways, which is sort of like having a sweet potato pie and not paying for it, but that's another story. What I'm trying not to do is to make this sound as though it is a pejorative comparison by saying that after the first word it all went downhill. Now see, I'm trying not to say that, so I'm not, because in the three-dimensional world, anybody that believes there's a downhill is in for a long sleigh ride, and it's not over to grandma's house either. It just seems to be downhill. But I am not saying that after the first word it all begins to break up. It all begins to be less efficient. I'm not saying any of that. That's why I said what I said. That I called it conditioned, that all thought, all speech is either conditioned or unadorned. And after the first word, after the Big Bang, after what it was that Allah or Jehovah, or what was that other God, Herb? Whatever it was that he says, you know, Shazam, that's not Herb though, but a boom, bang, wow, there, okay, all right. That is the only unconditioned, unadorned word. But I am not saying that after that things went downhill, because in a sense things, it's no more true, but in a sense things have gone uphill, in the sense that life becomes more complex. But there is a usable and quite interesting, once you begin to see it, aspect to this, or I wouldn't bring it up, wherein in the 3D world it can apparently, as I was trying to get you to see again last time we were taping, that apparently things can go in one direction, such as the intellect getting fired up expands man's possibilities, right, except for this, it narrows them. And only a very pedestrian, earthbound intellect would say, well, wait a minute, you can't have it both ways. See, none of you would do that. None of you are so anchored any longer, I'm sure. In the same, or in a similar manner, I'm trying to point out to you, sort of, that as the words became adorned, as thought became conditioned, it did both in the three-dimensional world. It went uphill and it went downhill, except I'm not going to put it to you that way. It is a more enriched possibility behind me just saying after the first word, which was unconditioned. After that, every other word, every other thought is adorned. It cannot be otherwise. To some degree, now, you're only once a virgin. I hate to break the news to some of you guys, but from a real explorer's view, the step from unadorned thought, the unadorned word, to the conditioned, which is the step also from the wet to the dry brain. But the step from the first word to all succeeding words from a certain extraterrestrial view is actually more radical, is more drastic than was the general move and expansion from the wet brain to the dry brain, which those of you that have been in your own way following what I mean by these verbal sketches of the wet and dry brain, that, at least from all three-dimensional views, is a dramatic evolutionary step. It is the thing that singularly separates humans from all other creatures on this planet. But from another view, it is even more radical, basic, and drastic of going from that unadorned word to all of the succeeding words. Because it was after the first word, all of the adorned, all the conditioned words after that has made everything possible that man apparently has done here. Whatever it is, forget for good or ill, anything that man has done, through manipulating the environment, through using his thumb, anything he's done arose from the step from the first word to all succeeding words, because the first word would do nothing. That's why it seems to be so mysterious. Because to ordinary intelligence, the first word did it all. And I'm just telling you, the first word won't do anything. But by all intelligence, even if you're not religious, if you just read the biblical stories, or the Muslim stories of creation, then these gods go whammo, and everything's in creation. So you'd say, hey, they don't make words like that anymore. That was a big time word. That it did it all. Yes and no, as always. Because really it did nothing. Even if it created everything, it had to move. It had to become adorned. It had to become conditioned. It could not be an unconditional word. Now I'll grant you this. This is of no importance. That's why I'll grant you this. That, if there was a good old grandfather in your nervous system, reality, the grandfather God that went whammo and made everything, then all right, that was an unconditioned word. So what? If it had stopped there, we would not be staying here talking. The step is dramatic, and the ordinary intellect doesn't recognize it, and it wants to see, even taking all of this, of course, metaphorically, and people do think about this, even though they do not use my descriptions. They do think about that there is some secret at the center of the universe. Of course, the universe being themselves, that there is a secret and it's hidden in me somewhere. It's hidden in the collective consciousness of people. It's hidden somewhere, but there is the secret. The idea being, the reality behind the idea being, that there is this one word. Now they may say that they believe it's in a book or that some whole sentence. What is driving that energy, what is driving people to think about that, is the original unconditioned word. But if there was such a word and you found it, it would freeze you. It would have turned out that someone had drained all of your oil and you went ahead and drove off. You would freeze up if you could find, if there was such as we're describing, an actual word, and it was the original word, and it was the unconditioned word. It would freeze you up. The drastic stuff is going from the unconditioned to the adorned, from the unconditioned to the conditioned. That is drastic. Now, it is possible still on this planet, again, it's of no great importance, but it is possible, it happens on this planet, that even humans do not go through that stage. They're individuals. They are, according to life's own standards, judged to be less than middle class, less than normal, but it does happen that step does not go from one word to the conditions, to the conditioned speech, to the adorned thought. The move going from unconditioned word, to the adorned is succeeded verbally and three-dimensionally, experientially, in several specific ways that I have mentioned here and there over the last few nights. That is, going from the one word to all succeeding. The second word, from then on, it's all a matter that it's all then conditioned. You no longer have an unconditioned, pristine, unadorned, I'm not going to say plain, see, because if there's some word that created all, you couldn't say, well, that was a plain word. Succeeding this are such matters as this. The move apparently turns the universal into the local. The jump also has the primary siring the secondary. It also has what seems to be uncertain, potentially frustrating pluralities narrowed down and specifically limited in everybody. Overall, those three matters, that's enough to cover it all verbally for now. But what that can be summed up as is apparently some intellectual order is derived from the nonverbal chaos. See, if it had been left at the one word, that would still be nonverbal chaos. And don't say, well, one word runs your statement of nonverbal chaos. One word is not verbal. If it had stayed at one word, you would still have nonverbal chaos. Well, let's try a side trip. Other than, according to my verbal maps of late, other than me saying that this kind of interest, this kind of activity is quite specifically, always has been, to try and crank up your brain, trying to bring in a ninth cylinder into a good V8 engine, trying to ignite your own nervous system right now in your brain higher than it is now, not sideways, not to rearrange the evidence up there, not to take the chemical conditions now and simply shake them up. No, it's not to change. It's not to change you. It's to do something else. But even considering that three-dimensionally to be a not unjust description of generally what this is headed towards. Somewhere before that, somewhere in the general firing range is another aspect that you can consider as a kind of method, and that we've covered, but I'm going to give you another way to look at it. Dealing with the wet brain being nonverbal, there's a way in which you can force the wet brain into the mode of being a kind of witness without any recording instruments. It's like being a reporter, and the sucker doesn't have a pad, doesn't have a pencil, got no Watts line, he's got no portable camcorder and antenna. You can take the wet brain being nonverbal, and you're not ever going to make it verbal, not in the three-dimensional sense, but there's a way in which you can force that thing into being an unnatural note taker, looker. It's not made to do that. Not in the sense we're talking about now, because it's not made to do anything in any sense we can talk about, because it's already foreign. It's a foreign language. Well, maybe you're not speaking the right one. You can speak Farsi, German, Italian, and it's all a foreign language to the wet brain. If it could say anything, it'd go, huh? But you can force it into a mode wherein it will observe, it will watch. You can make it do it, but if you're talking about the dry brain, which would be the only place that you should be referring to any sort of observation or study, just looking around, if it is observing anything, if anything seems to be stimulating, or if you're getting better, running even parallel to its own internal chemical actions, you are going to be conditionally talking about it. You can't note it unless you think about it. You don't think about it unless you're talking about it. So it is absolutely unnatural. I'll put it to you this way. Three-dimensionally, it can't be done, if that makes you happy. There's no way you can get the nonverbal brain to verbalize. There's no way that you can get the nonverbal brain to do the sorts of things that the verbal brain, the dry brain, will do. All right? You can't make it talk. All right? I don't know why I'm saying all right. I'm the one that said you can't make it talk. All right. All right. You can force it into being an unnatural looker. The benefit of this is it is then a singular, I said singular and I mean singular, non-cynical, non-caustic, non-critical observer. If anyone would care to note the past when I've tried to make up, well, I didn't try, I succeeded in the word neuralize and gave you several definitions. To remember something without thinking about it. On alternate days, to think about something without remembering, if that's harder. To bite on something without tasting it. To look at something, and either, whichever way you can deal with this, to look at something without seeing it, or to see something without looking at it, but mainly to be able to look at something and it not know you're looking at it. I give you now, even in a sense, a closer material description of it. It's to force the wet brain into doing things that are absolutely, I'm talking about, when I say absolutely, materially, physically, almost impossible. You're asking frogs to fly, and yet you can do it. It can observe, and it can't talk, which makes an observer, when I say that it is non-critical, non-caustic, there is another method that I've never talked about. I'll give you this one. It's not far removed from this. It is a revolutionary tool, and the name of it is this. Quotation marks. I have no comment at this time method. Now, if it's good enough for politicians, I don't know how much lower I can go unless we're going to do the limbo. The only reason I bring that up is this is used, life makes this used in life. You've all heard that. Some reporter jumps out to this senator or congressman or undersecretary of something and says, well, it's another day of revelations about your department and your strange sex habits and the way you dress in private. It looks like your whole career is going down the toilet, right, Senator? And the man brushes his silver hair back and straightens his power tie, or now it's, I guess, a semi-power tie, and says, I have no comment at this time. And he tries to press on to his limo. As always, if you had this kind of intellectual embrace of the whole universe, if you were not tied to local reality and local time, life is all the time giving out secrets. It doesn't consider giving out secrets. It's not trying to hide anything from you. But all these kind of little things, life, you're not seeing, of course, the complete picture, but you can see things that life is using. It works for life. You think that's not some strong stuff? Now, I'll grant you this. This is not important again, but we could say, this shouldn't stop you, but so that you might see that I'm not simply being tropical in this. It might seem to be a pretty small thing because you only hear this said. Well, who knows, once a month? Maybe somebody only says it on this planet. One person, maybe once a day. So you could say, in the great scheme of things, as far as I can sensually perceive it, from a 3D level, that seems to be fairly small potatoes. But yet, life is doing it. So you don't know what kind of big or even middle-sized potatoes it is somewhere else. That life, through man, is having people say, I have no comment at this time. It is a wonderful little tool if you know how to do it. And as some of you already have got to suspect, not that you use that on other people. No. That's beyond small potatoes. That's down to green peas and miniature rutabagas. No. It's within your own universe. There was an old vaudeville bit. It's supposed to have been a very parsimonious, a skinflint. And they've already set it up some way. You're supposed to know he's a skinflint. And a mugger jumps out with a pistol and says, your money or your life. And the mugger says, well, come on. The guy says, I'm thinking. Internally, I have no comment at this time is sort of like a continual, I'm thinking. Because it would apparently, I can immediately lay it at the doorstep of the dialogue. But as it seems to be you talking to yourself, well, we got to decide something, we got to do something. Of course, it is the flow of life. It is the flow of energy. It is the roll of the tide. You don't have to be from Clemson. It's the energy running through you that you feel like, well, I got to decide something. And somebody says, what do you think about this matter? Well, and then usually, under just general circumstance, that kind of scenario I just set up would happen, you finally have to say something. Something is said through your mouth. Well, all right. How about internally? Again, shift it from apparently having to deal with other people, if somebody demanding an answer, is internally. The flow of life into the conditioned, into the local reality of the intellect is continual. You have got no choice trying to form sentences that are reasonable, that are rational, that have some sort of punctuation that apparently get somewhere. Like the reporter saying, well, what do you think of so-and-so? Or now that your life is about to just go right into the sewer, how do you feel? What do you think? I'm thinking. I have no comment at this time. It is, I'm suggesting to you, a quite valid way to use the adorned verbal universe that is apparently continually something pushing on you. An 18-wheeler behind you flashing its lights. Just running up on your bumper all the time like, yeah, get out of my way, or, what are we going to do? Are we going to turn off the next essay? Are you going to stop? We're going to go to the bathroom, going to get some coffee? As you go, I'm thinking. But it's got to be an infinite, well, until you find some other way to do your own way, that it's continually, the punchline never happens that people expect. That is your money or your life. The answer of, all right, here's my money. You got to stall the bid out forever. That little piece of business there on a vaudeville stage would be good for what? Your money or your life? I don't have a watch. Well, I'm thinking. What was that, 20 seconds? And then you got to go into something else. You've got to be able to take this and turn that into just open end. Let's don't say how long, but certainly not 20 seconds. As long as it is feasible, as long as it is profitable, they can flash their lights, blow their horn. The mugger go, well, come on, I don't have all night. All right, I'm thinking. As though, in a minute now, I'll have a comment. All right, like, well, I have no comment at this time. The tacit part being, well, I'll have a comment later. Which I didn't tell you that the method was, I have no comment at this time, but I will later. No, it's, I have no comment at this time. And let them think whatever they want to. Well, I guess I'll catch you later. I don't know. Maybe you will. Or maybe later you'll have a comment. Will you? And of course you can say, well, no, I don't want to comment on that at this time. It is a continual, I'm thinking. That the crowds, individuals, the truck behind you, the reporter, the mugger, what they're asking for is, can we put a period here? Can we do that? Can we take this adorned sentence and at least bring this thing to some temporary halt? Well, I'm thinking. Well, why don't we just go ahead? You got to decide something. Why don't we just go ahead and tell them, no, I won't do it? Well, let's tell them that, yes, I will do it. Just do something. I'm thinking. How about from Vaudeville to Madison Avenue? It could be. You could take a twist on, what was it there? Gallo Brothers? A variation of I have no comment at this time, and it could be your slogan of, I will say no word before it's time. And then some. Can you also begin to see, or at least suspect, that things are generally wired up so that even man's ordinary thinking of action will always exceed action. Think about that for a second. I always like the response when I say, think about it for a second, and what I get is, all right, I'll speak for you. From certain wired up views, if you're just listening at an ordinary level, you should say, well, Jesus, you outdid yourself in stating the obvious again. Or, from another view, you go, what the hell does that mean? But it can be seen in a certain way as being absolutely obvious. that mankind is wired up so that thinking of action will always exceed action. Now you can say, well, that's obvious. You could even blame it on me and say, well, that's what you've been talking about for these first 20 or 30 minutes. It is the one word, the unconditioned word, becoming adorned. It is the wet, silent, or at least non-verbal brain taking the step into the dry brain, into the verbal brain. And by so doing, people now, just everybody, they think about action more than they act. Because your brain goes faster than you can move. You think about more things than you could ever do. If you're going to try to bring them somewhere in line, you'd have to in some way find a switch and turn your brain off, what, 98% of the time? Some of you lard asses, 99% of the time. That was a psychological sidestep. It is not that obvious. But you could even carry it a little bit further. Even say that I covered it already. And say that if man's thinking of action did not exceed his action, then we would be back to the point of saying that we would have no progress, we would have no evolution, we'd have no technology, there would be none of the manifestations of man's handiwork. His thumbs would have been wasted. That his thinking of action must exceed his action, or else there would be no dreams. We would have no soft reality. People would not think, well, how could I improve a zipper? How could we improve a microphone? That you've got to think more of action than action, or else there would be no plans. There would be no technological progress. Speaking of progress, we have now trained several people that we're going to turn the audio tape over to the other side. I guess we should film this, so in case you people out there don't believe that we can do this. I'm like you, if I had not seen it myself, I would not have believed it. All of that, if you were following, should seem obvious. There's nothing at all otherworldly in my description of man being wired up to think more of action than to act. That it is necessary that men dream in some way, even in the scientific sense, that men plan, that men try and theorize, and so they've got to have an excess of thinking of action vis-a-vis action. But now let me ask you, that sounds fine, that sounds reasonable, sounds almost irrefutable. But why should things be so arranged? Why should, since man uniquely on this planet can do the second part, that other things on this planet can act, can move, but can act, but only man, from your sensual observation, can do the second, that has the alternative not only of acting, but of thinking of acting. So since he has this, why should there be an overload one side compared to the other? And it's an extreme overload. The thinking of action. Surely all of you heard it when I said 98% you'd have to cut out to even it up. I mean, it's not hard for you to see. You're thinking of action. As you can sit there in almost milliseconds and think of more action than if you shut down the thinking of action. If you shut down the dry brain, the talking part, just after, let's say, a second, if you're really good, it would take you 16 hours to do the action that you thought about in a second. There's that kind of inequity between thinking of action and action. Now I'm asking you again, although it seems as though, from a quite valid view, that there's got to be more thinking of action going on, or humans would not be humans. We would not have progress, we would not have technology, etc. That seems so. But I ask you now to try and take another look, break away from that kind of local logic. Why? Why not could it would be more efficient that as soon as a man thought of something, an individual the kind of collective intelligence that seems to happen at times when there seems to be movements technologically, scientifically, at certain places and areas in history. Why is it that a man suddenly has a thought of action, like, here's what we should do to improve zippers? Did it be manifest almost as soon as somebody thought about it? Now, I understand that physically it would take a little while to come up with the new designs or to have the machinery put together to make the change in the zipper or in a microphone. A little lag there. But the real lag is this. The time it takes that life has apparently had a good new thinking of action, a good new idea. One person does not stand up. A Newton, a Galileo, Herb, does not stand up and says, I've got this great new idea that will improve zippers. He does not stand up, or she, and say that, and a large segment of people, that is, enough people that would put the new zipper into production post-haste. And not enough people go, you're right. And that's the end of it. They say, you're right. I don't mean that that's the end of it, but you're right, and therefore it goes right into production. Just, what if it was something that does not seem to be as material? What if somebody, I think somebody's already done this in the past history if I remember my readings. I think it was read to me, but I think there's been humans on this planet that said things such as this that seem to be closer to a soft reality, at least non-scientific. It's not something you got to make. You have to go into production of making zippers. Just some man says, hark, and a few people hark, and he says, we'd all be better if we didn't get mad. If we didn't get angry at our fellow man. At least over 9 primary affairs. I don't know why he came up talking like me, but in other words, over everyday stuff. We would all be better off and live happier lives if we didn't get mad. All right, let's assume that that's true. It's in the wiring system, people all over this planet to go, yeah, that's true. Ain't no doubt that's true. I left my religion, but Jesus, that's still true. I know it's true. All right, they all say it's true. The large percentage of humanity says it's true. Does it go into production? Well, there's been a lag thus far, at least, pushing 5,000 years by your time, that the people said, we should be nice to our fellow person. You know, assuming he's not going to hurt us. We should be nice. And it was as though, looking back now, not just 5,000 years, but if you just heard the first time when I said it, 2 minutes ago, to feel, well, that's true. I don't know why, it's undeniably true. It's just non-verbally true even. It's true. There is a lag. There is a difference between the thinking of action. In this case, it's not putting into production materialistically a new piece of technology, of a zipper or a microphone. It's behavior, which is action. If you've ceased to hate your fellow man, if you ceased to be aggressive to your fellow man when he was not aggressive to you physically, that could go into production immediately. And it strikes many people as that's the proper thing. That's the way a zipper should be made, as to where it does not hate its fellow zipper. So, there would seem to be just immediately between the thinking of action, let's just assume, surely you hear what I'm saying, I'm just commenting on life. Love your fellow man, let's just make it simple. Love your neighbor. It strikes people everywhere. It's in their wiring system all over this planet. That if you stopped all 6 billion people, and except for those that were taking strange substances in their nose, or perhaps had played in JB's band a few years back, that people would say, yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. That's the way a zipper should be made. Why is there then such an excess between the thinking of action, in this case the thinking of behavior of love your fellow man, and the action itself? It doesn't require that there go be something made that you have to redesign, you have to straighten up the production line, you have to develop some new machinery to make the change in the zipper, to make maybe a whole new zipper. If this indeed is an improvement, love your fellow man, love your neighbor. If it is an improvement, and that's the thinking of action, and everybody, large percentage of life, of humans say, yes, that is. There's no doubt it is. As if they had a choice. They say it is. So why is that still in such excess to the behavior itself? That is, of actually loving your fellow man. Because it does not require that you go back and retool the factory. It requires that you hear it, and if it is valid, to go, yes, that's true, I'll do that. So the lag time was what? A second. Now, does it seem as reasonable, as inevitable, as obvious as I was saying it was from my other example, that the thinking of action has got to exceed action from one view, or there would be no dreams. Man would not plan, man would not improve things, man would never have improved the zipper. We'd still be using, if it hadn't been for dreams, we'd still be using a kerosene zipper, instead of an electronic zipper. That seems true enough. But now, what gives? To what ends does life have it arranged when you get beyond the material, when you go sideways into just the behavior, the thinking of man himself? That there are already words, forms of energy that have been put through man's brain that says such and such would be the way to act. So he's already got the thinking of action, says this would be the correct way, the next step to improve the zipper. And it just strikes him, yes, no doubt. Why the lag time? Why is it still so weighted in the thinking of action, to action? What else is there to dream of if man agrees, by and large, that yes, we should love our fellow man? And out of the 6 billion, anybody that passes for reasonable, bourgeoisie, hoi polloi, sane, goes yes. Then, what gives that you wait? All right, why doesn't it go in production? And this got nothing to do with morality. Got nothing to do with religion. I could have picked out something else. That it's better to be intelligent. And everybody says, yes, it is. And then you wait. And it's almost then like life says, I'm thinking. Well, not really. It's then as though life through humans says, well, I agreed. What else you want? God forbid that you actually look for action to follow the thinking of action. That's not the way things operate. If you can find how to withhold the tide that flows through everyone's nervous system, cresting in the dry brain with a few pools and eddies in some people that I guess we shouldn't go into. At least they might want to come give you some additional tests. And if I were you, I would not take them. Trust me. But if you can withstand, if you can begin to divert, or if you can hold up this kind of tide that flows through that makes everyone want to comment on everything all of the time. And the comment is always conditional, adorned. There is no unconditional. There is no so-called observation. There is no so-called objective study that you can make. It is all adorned. Every comment that you're going to make, if you are simply reacting to the flow of energy going through your nervous system, as it is now, all of it is going to be a statement of local reality. But if you can indeed find out how, and I was giving you one hint tonight, that you can force the wet brain into a kind of nonverbal reporting, which should be, by all other three-dimensional forms of reality, by everything that's sane and reasonable and apparently possible here, to make it do a job that requires absolutely verbalization to do, that you can turn it into a reporter that cannot talk. Which even if you can do it, if we're going to take an ordinary view, what good would it do? What if you could force a deaf, blind, mute, wearing a 4-foot thick overcoat from head to toe, if you could force it into going out, and I want you to be my eye in the sky. I want you to be my man in the street. You be my Edward R. Murrow around the world and get back with me. And you could send this thing out. And it would do it in some way. From an ordinary view, then the question is, well, what the hell good would it do? And of course, from an ordinary view, you'd be within your rights to make such a caustic statement at my expense. Except for this. At least you think I'll give in to ordinary intelligence. That you say, well, what good's it going to do if you get it? It could go out. It cannot see. It can't, well, you don't know what it can see, but it cannot talk. It can't write. What good's it going to do? So you got me, right? Nay, 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 wait a minute. Then I could say this. All right, I could say to you, you got something there, but dig this. At least it won't send you back false reports. Huh? At least it will not send you back biased information. At least it will not send back prejudicial little pieces of info. Like, well, here's what I got today, and I'll check back with you later. You know, I'm under fire now, and this is all I could get out. At least it won't do that. That's not the point, but I just wanted to show you I don't have to take that kind of shit off ordinary intelligence. Of course, nobody does unless you're ordinary. And then you got to take it and like it. No, you don't. You got to take it, but you do like it. You don't. It's not that you have to like it. Life does not have to torture you to do the inevitable. Yeah. But at any rate, if you can stop that tide, if you can stop the natural comment, what you do is then become a true artist. No matter who you are, that is the true art. It is a form of being able to think anew. And there is no art. I trust Scarlatti and Von Suppe and Wilson Pickett will forgive me. If not Balzac and... What if I'm to Mickey Splaney? I don't want to go into it. The true art of all kinds is to be able to think anew. And to think anew, you have got to get away from your home planet. You have got to break loose from your own internal universe. You have got to get beyond local reality. And it doesn't matter what yours is. You have got to get past adorned comment, adorned thought. It's just piling on the adjectives. Kyroots mentioned that a few nights ago, and I was going to try and let it slide, but when in doubt, if I'm quoting the man correctly, assuming he is a man, when in doubt, especially in a strange place, but when in doubt, pile on the adjectives. See, what if the first word, instead of whammo or whatever I made up, what if the first word was like, let's get real specific. What if the first word was car? After the first word. And that was the word that did it all. Which, come to think about it, is not a bad word the way things have turned out here. That could have been machine, but let's say car. All right, if that was the word and it put it all going, it would seem to be the word. It got it all going. We need that word. What was the second word? There wasn't another noun. The second word. Of course, I got to tell you the truth. In a more complex place, if there was a first word, then there wasn't a second word. You'd have to be talking about like shells, spherical shells coming out in at least 4 dimensions. It wouldn't be just one word. It'd be the center, and it would be like the cloud of a new atmosphere with God knows how many words. But we'll call it the second word. It'd be the second comment. The second comment. You understand what I'm saying? A spherical shell would be like just an infinite number just going out from the center. Then the center was no shell. The center was a center, a core, the one word. the unadorned, unconditioned word. But then after that, it's not just a second, because that would be only true in a linear world. But it goes out, and so then you've got the second comments, or the second word. The second words would all be, may I suggest to you, fucking adjectives. What else would they be? You said car, and that got everything going. What are you going to say after that? Think about it. What else are you going to say after car? If we said engine, I could have made it actually a verb. It doesn't matter, but to ordinary intelligence, it would seem that it should be. Verbs are just things that nouns do. If they got the energy to get off their lard ass. And so it would seem to be a noun would be of supreme importance. But even if it was a verb, then the second sphere would be all adverbs or adjectives. What else are you going to say? If the word, the Big Bang, was car, after that it has got to be some kind of adorning of the first word, the first thought. Why is it that people cannot simply say, it's not psychological, for you people getting this on tape at some other time in some other place. It has to do with the way energy moves in the universe, and words are the way energy moves through man's nervous system up here. But why is it people cannot simply say yes or no ordinarily? Now it's looked at as being some sort of psychological problem or some sociological phenomenon that amongst friends or amongst family, somebody says, can I do so-and-so? And normally you don't say no or yes. You may say no, but it's normally a comma, and then you won't say why. At least you adorn it. Can I do so-and-so? No, I wish you wouldn't. Well, not now. Can I do so-and-so? No. Well, what do you think about this and that? Do you agree with this? I don't. Sometimes I think, I don't. What do you think? It is almost impossible. It almost does not happen in the general wiring scheme of life that there is that kind of one-stroke surgical cut made with that unadorned scalpel and somebody just say yes or no. You're back to, as I used to call it, trying to do semi-major surgery with a rusty pocket knife. Well, and I might also refer you back, if you want to jump sideways about 3 different directions, since I was putting them out, the Socrates kind of stories, the Pilate stories, and Jesus of, hey, just say yes or no. And the guys wouldn't do it. They want to go, well, and hell, they want to talk for 50 pages. And the guy said, look, just say yes or no. Are you guilty or not guilty? Well, on the one hand, don't give me this one hand, I got to go. Yes or no? Of course, I'm inferring to you that inside of those soft reality stories is more than what appears on the surface. That is, that Socrates, it's not that he was unable to say yes or no, but he understood the way things were arranged. Back to the main track. It is almost impossible, notice, in you, to just say something. Especially if there seems to be some potential passion in the conversation. That somebody says, what do you think of me? Or what do you think of what I just did? How do you like what I painted? How do you feel about the comments I made? Can I ask your opinion? Do I have your permission to do so-and-so? It is not in the normal scheme of things for the verbal energy passing from one human to another for someone to simply say yes or no. Just say, hey, you should know that. I've talked about it from another direction before. It just doesn't seem sociable. I'm going to put psychological kinds of views on it if you think you're missing it. It just seems like that it's not civil. And if it was ordinary people doing it, I'll grant you it would sound uncivil. It would strike you as sort of an unusual conversation. Or if you saw a whole family and they just talked in unadorned ways, as much as possible dealing with local reality, you would find it unusual. There'd probably, if it did happen, which I know, relatively speaking, it could be observed, it would be amongst people that would be just barely literate, just barely speech functional, and they just say yes, no, and hell, fuck, damn, no, yes. But if you moved into an area where people seem to be just ordinary middle class, literate, sophisticated, and if you overheard, if you could hide in a closet, and there was some family, let's say, a group of people, and they talked in that way, I suggest that you would be upset. You would be concerned. You'd probably want to get out of that closet and get out of that house, and you wouldn't really know why. That there seems to be, you could peep out and they're dressed up. There's books in the house. They appear to be quite sane people, and if they were speaking on the basis of almost yes, no, it would strike one's own nervous system, if you're ordinary, as being strangely, perhaps dangerously peculiar. And yet what I am referring to, sort of, could be a kind of, if it were done to where someone else observed it, it would be almost pushing the wet brain into, again, the areas wherein it is not at all equipped to operate. I keep saying it's unnatural, if you're following what I'm saying, is to get the wet brain doing things that the dry brain should be doing, that only the dry brain actually can do from all three-dimensional observation. If that still sounds too sticky, try it the other way right quick. Taking the dry brain and kind of paring down, trying to narrow down the fat on it, the kind of excess verbalization, the excess from a relatively exploratory view of its thinking of action, and to get it closer to, trying to draw like the wet and the dry together, which is not a good description, but it's a good description three-dimensionally. It's trying to draw them somewhere closer together, because the wet brain, if it could talk, it would be dealing, is why man has these dreams that I would like to track back to the Big Bang, or boy, I wish I was there when God said the word, or it's important that we even know about it, because what the dry brain is thinking is what, or the wet brain, non-verbally, if I could actually talk, and if it could talk, what would it say? And its vocabulary, I don't care if it had a working vocabulary of 50,000 words. The wet brain, I'm playing with justice three-dimensional, but if we could bring it to the point that it could talk and operate in lieu of, or in partnership with the dry brain, I'm suggesting you out of a 50,000 word vocabulary, 99% of the time the wet brain would deal with 2 words. Well, 2 if you cut out profanity. Yes and no. That might be it. And that's all that it would see any need for. If it could see all of the secondary activities, if it did observe the dry brain, if it did observe how man has turned into a kind of hobby pursuer, that life now consists primarily of people at our time and place of secondary activities. At least indirectly, almost everything is now secondary. That it is a kind of adorned version of either eating, fucking, or resting. That's about it. That's about it. There is a contest for anybody out there that thinks there's something else. Write it down and send it in. All of this will amount to what I started to say at this last paragraph. It would be a form of real art, because you would be thinking anew, not taking the same information that's already in the dry brain and rearranging it, not trying to think the opposite of something you've already thought. The information would be new. The thoughts would be new. There would be a kind of virgin thoughts all over. Although, remember, you can only be a virgin once, right? Right. Wrong. The dry brain can only be a virgin once. The creation that the one word did is only a virgin once. As soon as the second word comes out, you've been fucked. You have engaged in a kind of cerebral copulation, if that's something. You are no longer a virgin. But if you can activate the brain, it's like you have created your own new virgin. You hadn't gone back and virginized the wet or the dry brain, but it's a new time. But after the first word, after the first comment, you've lost it. It has become adorned. It has become localized. It has become splintered from the universal, which is the only way it can be under ordinary conditions. It's the only way it can be with things as they are now. But the true art would be that you are literally thinking anew. Not the old information. You are thinking anew. It's not just a rearrangement of the old chemicals. It is actually getting chemical reactions into areas of the brain that are now not activated. You are expanding, and I'll still tie in, I know many of you it sounded strange, and I don't mean it was an accident or a failure on my part, it was strange to even try to talk about, but if you found that there is a way, remember what I've described as neuralizing, but there is a way that you can almost, it's a fair description, I wouldn't say it, you can almost take the wet brain and force it into the position, into a new mode of it being a reporter with no means to report. But you can do this, and you can expand your coverage. You can expand the amount of news, of information that comes back to you, except it's not in a way that is currently available. It does not come over the phone lines as you now have them. It does not come through written reports because it got no pencil. It has no pad. It doesn't even know where to buy paper. But you can get your reports. But I'll put it to you this way. They are strange reports. Now I said that, and I'm going to say they're not strange, but they are strange reports because it's not the reports that the local dry brain stringer would ever phone in or to send in. Never. For one thing, I guess it would be somewhat like a version of the atheist dollar prayer. If you're waiting for the wet brain reporter to call in the information, like I'm telling you you can do in a sense, you're always thinking, did the phone ring? Did the phone ring? And then you got to keep remembering, well, the son of a bitch don't even have a quarter. He can't call. You know, you keep wanting to check the mail, and yet I'm telling you, he can send in reports. And they are, when I said strange, I just did that for sort of a dramatic purpose. They're unexpected. They're out of the ordinary. They are not fillers. They are not man bites dog. Dog bites man. Two men bite one dog. Continued on page 7. The reports are unexpected. The reports do not have, they're not limited to local reality. Does that give you any hint? If it doesn't, they don't make sense. How about that? They do not make sense locally. The dry brain hears them. Well, I'll give you some example in case this is saying weird. How about the way that I sound sometimes? We don't blame it on me or you. It's just circumstance. Just the atmospheric conditions and the humidity. That sometimes I'm still speaking English, and maybe some people around you seem to be nodding or taking notes, and suddenly you feel like, what the hell is he talking about? The words are English. In the sentence, I almost thought I knew what he was going to say, and it went. There is some, I'm hearing you might find some metaphorical significance, parallel between that and what I'm trying to describe, that the kind of information that you can almost force your own nonverbal senses, your own nonverbal nervous system, the part literally of your brain, the older part, the wetter part, the nonverbal part, you can force it into a mode, into a role that it was not equipped to do, and that is of being able to send in information and it's got no way to report. And if the dry brain does listen in, what the hint I was trying to give is not dissimilar to at times of you, there you sit, and I know it, and it strikes you at times like you just kind of wandered in here, even though you've been coming here for months or years, that it's like, where the hell am I? It's English, and it's saying something, the words almost make sense in some kind of little linear order, but my God, what is it? That I suggest to you when I was saying that the information that the wet brain could send back as a nonverbal reporter, and I kept saying it was strange and weird and told you it wasn't strange and weird, just unexpected. And I said, all right, I'll tell you what, it's nuts, it's insane. That's the way it would sound to dry brain. And not some kind of spooky, that Elvis is alive with 3 heads, or God is a country and western singer. When I say it's unusual, it's just unusual that it all sounds, as far as the dry brain might hear some of it, that, well, those words, that's nothing unusual. Except when it listens, it is so goddamn unusual, it don't know what the hell is going on. That is when you begin to get around the spherical corner, and you realize that all of this is well and good. Everything here is fine. If you like this, you're going to love that. That all of this keeps wrapping around into another place. And all these questions that people think they have is on the basis that everything that the nervous system can talk about has become localized here. It had to. It narrowed down all pluralities, not expanded them. And it took what would have been a first word, and after that it had to adorn it all. That is what progress is. You had the original car, but it wasn't enough. Who the hell wants a black, that's the only color you could get, Model T? Now we can have red and chartreuse Ferraris. Fast! You understand? I adorned it. They're now adjectives. A Ferrari car, not just a car. A green, fast, foreign, sports car. That is progress. Is adjectives. What is not progress is yes or no, right? How about to yourself? Forget now that you're dealing with somebody else asking you, Daddy, can I do so-and-so? Or, honey, can I have another blankety-blank? How about with yourself? The reports that you are apparently making, because you are a reporter, you are measuring and you're reporting for life, you think you're reporting for yourself, that you're continually taking the measurement, making reports about what's going on, but all the reports are none but adjectives. The reports are never yes or no. You don't send out your own system to go and observe, what do I think of life today? Is life any good today? No. I sent you out to observe. Did you find that fire? Yep. That's what you ask. But of course that's not the way life works. If the city desk, the general manager, sends you out to cover a fire and you come back in later, he says, well, did you find the fire? Yeah. Now in the adorned local world, that's not what he asked. I know that's what the word said, but you know here on this planet, just what you say is not what you mean, right? So he said, did you find the fire? Yeah. Well, what? Did you find the fire? Yeah. That is not the way life works. That is not, for whatever reasons, the reasons should be obvious, but for some reason, that is not a sufficient churning up of the intellectual accounts of humanity. Even when it would do. When it's just you talking. And I do not mean this pejoratively again, although it ordinarily would sound like it amongst people. Humans are given to babble. And it's not psychological. It's not a sign of a low IQ. I'm not saying that it's not necessarily not a sign, but everybody babbles. It seems to be part of the social intercourse, which it is. But it's also a manifestation of something else. That's what I've been talking about all night. And there's a way in which it can be to your advantage. And you can do it, by the way. You can babble and not babble. I mean, if you must babble, it's like that great old piece of philosophy. When in Bucharest, do as the Bucharestians do. Well, I wasn't going to repeat the cliche about that other country a little south of there. You can babble. Does everybody lose their sense of humor after I've talked for about an hour or more? Things are not wired up in you. And if you stopped and you let your dry brain try to analyze or respond to what I'm saying, you would say, quite correctly perhaps, that, well, we do talk more than is necessary. When you get home, if your mate says, did you come in late from work? And your mate says, well, I was watching the news and they said there was a tremendous wreck out there on the interstate the way you come home. Is that why you're late? Yeah. Then if you tried to analyze that from the dry brain view, it's like, well, that's kind of curt. I mean, people talk not just to get information. People talk to be sociable. And you should say, well, yeah, it was. Boy, it was horrible. Boy, I bet it was. Was anybody hurt bad? Well, it looked like there were 4 or 5 ambulances, and plus the air conditioning went off in the car, and I was real hot. All right, babble. There's nothing wrong with it. But nobody ever asked why. Well, I'm sure somebody has asked why in the ordinary world, and then they would come up with such things as either in certain pathological cases that it has to do, of course, with the time-honored and all cherished subconscious traumas, all the way to that, from that to, well, people simply talk to be sociable. They don't talk just to relay information. The mate was not asking, were you in that wreck, just for the person to say, yep. They got home, they hadn't seen each other in hours, and talk as part of the social intercourse of people. Yes, yes, yes. But nobody ever asked, beyond all that, which is always a beyond that, because all this has to do with energy. All this is about life and humans expanding. That's what it is. For what particular purpose? That's never looked at, never considered, is being served by people saying more than is absolutely necessary, by saying more than if the wet brain could talk, what it would say. And if the wet brain could talk, it would serve its own purposes, it would protect itself just as well verbally as it does non-verbally, which is quite well, as witnessed by the fact you're still alive. Because if it was up to your verbal brain, most of you wouldn't be here. Most of you have been slapped around silly and had your throat cut and been discarded and thrown outside the walls. Laid in down there at the northeast corner along with Hoffa, up there in the Meadowlands. You'd be bad news. You'd be gone. If it was up to your dry brain. The wet brain looks after itself quite well, in spite of some of what goes on upstairs. So if it could talk, what I'm suggesting to you, it would likewise, in a most efficient manner, look after itself verbally. That's what you can use. But then it's to consider, well, why is it arranged so that the wet brain no longer, of course it was never, but the wet brain did not progress in such a way that it simply began to talk. It's as though there was a real step, a quantum move from this wet brain to the dry one. It's not just a gradual progression. It is, but you can't say it three-dimensionally, so can't go into that. It's not just a gradual progression, it is a real drastic step. It's not, but we can't go into that tonight. But if it had gone in such a way that the wet brain simply began to talk, instead of this dry brain, instead of this like new atmosphere began to develop around this wet, churning, silent orb of the wet brain, if it had begun to talk, then I am suggesting that it would operate in the same kind of efficient way that it does now non-verbally, and that it would not be babbling. It would be closer to dealing with unadorned thought. Specifically, in this case, if it could, unadorned, unconditional speech. And you can speak to yourself in a way that is more universal, that is less adorned, even if you, for whatever reasons, which can be quite ordinary and quite acceptable, even if externally you're doing otherwise. That is, that you're apparently babbling along, that somebody wants you to babble, and they babble, and they're waiting for you to babble, and you babble. But here's one thing you can do without a tape, is do not babble about primary stuff. Babble about that which is babbable. Secondary. Now you people can do that amongst yourselves even. Those of you involved with this that live together without doing anybody any harm, and you can do it with everybody else. Your parents, you can do it with anybody. You can babble, but do not babble about primary stuff. And if you listen, other people want to. They got no choice. They cannot do it exactly on the money, because the dry brain cannot, in some pristine manner, talk about primary. It's always going to, in a sense, have one foot in the mud. It's going to be, in one sense, always talking in adjectives. and adorn comments. So that's just the way things are arranged. People want to talk about sex. Even your family, they're going to call it sex. They want to ask you about your love life, or are you going to get divorced again? People want to talk about death, illness. Great conversational topics. They'll want to take something that should be a yes or no and babble about it. Don't babble about primary affairs. Babble about that which is secondary. If you got to babble, and you just about have to do some babbling. Nothing wrong, but realize it's babble. Realize that what you're doing is transmitting energy. It's like you got Con Ed or the Pacific Gas and Light or Georgia Power. It's like they're in the semi behind you blinking their lights, or else they have this large power line, and they're getting up very close, almost to the point of going against the local sodomy laws, I guess. And it's forcing this energy to flow through you. And it'll come out and babble. It'll come out and babble up here, whether you're talking or not. But it'll come out and babble here. But be aware of it. Sometimes you can stop it. But if there seems to be at times that you don't want to stop it, or that the other people are expecting you to babble, just be sure that you are babbling about that which is non-primary. Don't babble about that. It's easy to do. All you got to do is remember it. And if you belong, if this is where you actually belong is involved with this, you'll find out that it is highly agreeable. Because all of you have been through times of almost wanting to comb your tongue, or going, boy, why did I sit there and run my mouth? I just talked myself to death about that. I wish I'd have shut up. And you don't really know why. If you will babble only about that which is babbleable, if you'll stay away from anything approaching primary, you'll enjoy it. It is beneficial in pushing the boundaries of local intelligence, of extending the envelope of information that you can receive from the dry brain, from the ordinary senses. But if you let that thing babble on, if it starts out babbling about some secondary, starts babbling about something apparently of no consequence whatsoever, just nit shit, just the absolute living ephemeral field of interest to somebody. It'll start there, but notice, because life needs certain kinds of energy, it needs combinations of energy. You can start out talking about the fashions of the day with your Aunt Charlie, and within 2 minutes, some way it's gone from fashions of the day to the fact that one of your old friends that you and him knew dropped dead yesterday of a heart attack. The segue is not even realized. It just goes from just almost nothing into the good friend died, and then Aunt Charlie's looking at you like, you don't look so well yourself. And suddenly you won't find a mirror, you think, no, I don't. Don't babble about primary affairs. We're out of tape. We're more than out of tape, believe that or not. If you want to talk about progress, I'm still doing this, and we're out of tape. Figure that. It could be worse, though. I could still be doing this and be out of thoughts. Then I'd have to adopt, I guess, an ordinary position and say, I will do no babble after it's time. So if I was ordinary, just running out of ideas certainly wouldn't stop me from talking, would it? What are you, an idiot? You mean you're going to quit just because you don't have anything to say? Surely you joke. I mean, right? Right? I'm thinking.